Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Fresh Agenda and Everate Global Insights. And Steve, we've got a bit of a trip around the world this week. Firstly, talk about Pulse, a little bit of an update out of South America, a review of our trip to the UK last week, and of course, chat of the week. So firstly, Steve, we did say a couple of weeks ago we were coming to Europe and we were hoping the weather would improve. And look what we've done.
We brought it.
Beautiful weather. Yep.
So this is a great show. We've been watching this for a few weeks as we see, the prospects for European weather warming up, not so much just for pasture grade, but whether it's going to be nice enough for us to travel around. It's working.
It's working.
We warmed up Chicago, went to London, had the same effect, and now on the continent, we've had what we'd call a summer day in Melbourne.
Yes,
it's
beautiful
awesome.
weather.
Yeah.
So on that positive note, Pulse, also quite positive, Steve, especially for whole milk powder. The Pulse ended up at $3,300 US a tonne this week, up just $25 a tonne from last week's GDT event, but a $150 gain on the previous Pulse event. So pretty good slope there for whole milk powder, Steve. Last week, we were pretty encouraged by that result with fairly broad-based demand for whole milk powder, and here we are again.
Yeah, it's holding up. So Skim, Joe, what happened there?
Yeah, Skim was not quite such a positive story. Dropped US $55 a tonne on the latest auction. It was up $30 a tonne on the prior Pulse event. So still just drifting sideways, really, Steve. A lot of talk here about, or concern about, how much skim milk powder is coming out of New Zealand. It's quite annoying for our European friends. So, yeah, pretty much a sideways result, you would have to say.
Yep. So South America now, Joe, we don't talk about South America very much.
Not enough.
Not enough. Data out of Brazil, we're putting a few things together here, a bit of a story. So this is about the whole milk powder market. Brazil's imports have been healthy for some time. April showed they're up 12% year on year, and the rolling annual total is just below a record, a couple of thousand tonnes below the record set in February. But in annual terms, you're up 41% over a year ago. So, what's causing that is a lot to do with weather. Argentina is also making less whole milk powder. Fresh data from that country shows whole milk powder output is still well below 2 or 3 years ago, and now lower output is converting naturally to lower exports. Despite that, the local region, mostly Brazil, is soaking up much more whole milk powder in the past year, 66% the past year, whereas in 2022 it was just 29%. So It's quite a shift. So that's shifted locally, shifted away from North Africa, and to New Zealand's advantage has been able to put more powder into that region.
And that needed to.
Is this going to change, Joe?
Yeah, as you said earlier, Steve, it's really about the weather in Brazil. We're getting some very heavy rainfall, some flooding in those blue areas where a lot of dairy production occurs in Brazil. So you would think that that's really playing havoc with milk production that'll come through in the next couple of weeks. Just in terms of milk prices, we're seeing those spot milk prices in Brazil just trending up there in the last few months. They haven't got as high as they have been the last time we saw a real bump in imports, Steve, but certainly trending upwards. It'll be interesting to watch this space in the next couple of months.
Yeah, as that flooding and wetness impacts milk production, we should see that lift. We might see a resurgence again in that trade. It's already high. So, yeah, one to watch.
Yes, definitely.
The United Kingdom, we went to the DIN conference, Dairy Industry Newsletter Conference, which we've been to for a few years now. It's a good little event, good turnout from the leadership of the UK industry. Joe, what were the takeaways that you took notes of?
Yeah, look, the focus of the conference was really about sustainability, but sort of more broadly, we felt there was a fairly confident vibe around the room this year. In the last couple of years when we've attended this conference, there's been a lot of discussion about Brexit and how difficult Brexit has made some of the businesses that are represented at the conference, how difficult it's made their business. The supply chains that have been built over many years not functioning so well. So this year it was a real feeling of we're putting Brexit behind us and we're getting on with things. They're really focused on doing in terms of sustainability. There's a strong retailer push, you would have to say, in the UK, Steve. We've seen over 25 years, UK retailers have had supplier groups within the dairy industry that are very closely linked to their brands. And so they're really in a position to sort of push that sustainability agenda, you would say. And the other interesting tidbit out of the conference, I guess, was a lot of discussion about food security that I guess we don't really hear in Australia, and we didn't really hear it in the US either. And one of the quotable quotes was, environmental obsession leads to production suppression. And that's really the feeling in the UK and more broadly in Europe. But this week we actually saw the UK government release a food security index. So there is a broader concern there, I think, around affordability and food security. We also heard a bit about the changing EU landscape, Steve.
Yeah, look, calling out an example of that was a view from one of the presenters that France will be pushed into net import in 2025, which, think about the success of French cheese exports, their specialty cheese exports. That's quite a turnaround. That milk supply is falling to the extent they'll be requiring product net imports into that country, which it's a far cry from where we've been. So look, I think the pressure on this issue is going to remain strong, and certainly it's a complaint across Europe that sustainability has gone too hard on as an agenda and to the extent of putting pressure on food security. So that's a space to keep watching.
Sure.
So while we're in the UK, I mean, one of the things going on in the background is some fairly difficult production conditions going on. It's very soggy, even though we've done some work to try and fix that by simply going there and warming it up. Milk is dropping. It's down 2% the last few weeks, which is not much when you put it in scale. But looking at that chart, it looks fairly dramatic. Due to a lack of feed, poor grazing conditions, it's going to take some time to dry out, which is a theme I think we're seeing in parts of the continent as well.
Sure.
The UK, though, and Ireland's probably worse than this, but they're at the bitter end of what's been going on in the weather.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing sort of the changing shape of the cheese market for the UK. We had the recent announcement of new capacity for Arlas, a big mozzarella investment in the UK, and at the same time buying an interesting Welsh whey business, which probably ties together quite well. But net imports of cheese are falling in the UK. Annually, up to March 2020, around 300,000 tonnes for the year to March 2020, now down to 230,000 tonnes, Steve. And I guess that's reflecting a little bit that the market's not quite as strong as it was in the UK, but also that there's a bit more being retained at home. So total exports from the UK have slowed. They've dropped 15% in milk solids equivalent terms in the first quarter of 2024. But cheese is bucking that trend. Cheese is up 25% year on year for the month of March and 23% up for the first quarter of 2024, Steve. And that's a 9% increase on the year to March. So fairly strong performance in terms of cheese exports from the UK. 80% of those cheese exports go to the EU, and that's rising as a share, Steve. So that trading relationship, despite Brexit, is still very strong, isn't it?
Yeah, these are some of the reasons why the industry is optimistic. They are kicking some goals. It's not just all about the market has got very tough internally, but I guess they're embracing it, and that's encouraging to go forward with.
Sure.
So, chart of the week, Jo, how are you going to wrap it up?
Yeah, well, just continuing our little trip around the world, Steve, let's go back to Australia. We're about 2 weeks away from what we affectionately know as the silly season in Australia. Opening farm gate milk prices will be announced on the 3rd of June this year. That's mandatory under our code in Australia. The spot commodity milk value, which is a calculation that we at Fresh Agenda have run for many years. It's based on the basket of commodities that the Australian industry produces. It's looking in the low $7 range, and we've just got a comparison there, Steve, with the New Zealand commodity milk value based on their basket of commodities. Obviously, the final farm gate price in Australia and those dotted lines are what farm gate prices actually are for each of those countries. That will be higher because of the exposure to value-added products, domestic markets, etc. But at the moment, we're projecting an Australian CMV of $7.70 per kilogram of milk solids for the 2024-25 season. So that infers that the price will come down from where it is now, which is about $9.40 for the southern region. So it'll be an interesting couple of weeks ahead, Steve.
Yeah, we've had the first shot fired in that milk price season. Saputo saying they're going to be somewhere in that range, $7.50 to $8. That looks reasonable, but we will see competition for milk surely come to the fore, and just how strong that is, and just whether some of those intermediaries that tend to bid higher for milk, whether they come through. So this is a very tense time in the industry at a time
Glad we're not there.
We'll stay away until contracts are out, so it won't be anything to do with us. So that's all from us this week. Thanks for viewing, and we'll be back again next week.